Hello, this is Dave again, and we're taking cell ultrastructure a little bit further with this video. So far we've talked about eukaryotic cells that have organelles. This video looks to start with at other cells from organisms called prokaryotes. Generally the common ones that we know about are bacteria. So let's just look at the difference between them to start with. Eukaryotic cells, these are cells that we build up animals from, plants, fungi, and a different group, Protoctista, which are mostly unicellular animals and plants, but we're called Protoctista. All of their cells, they have a nucleus, which of course is bound by membranes, and they have other cellular organelles, the ones we've been looking at previously, which are bound by membranes. Their ribosomes are of the larger 80S type. Prokaryotes, on the other hand, these are bacteria and archaea, and look at them. There is a typical prokaryote, a bacterium. They have no nucleus, none of them have a nucleus, they have no membrane-bound organelles in their cytoplasm at all. The organisms are all unicellular, and they are smaller than eukaryotic cells, something like 1/10 of the size in general, 1 to 10 micrometers. They have DNA, but it's a loop of DNA which is free in the cytoplasm, it's not held in any other structure. They have cell walls made of peptidoglycan, which is a protein carbohydrate substance. And the ribosomes they have are of the slightly smaller 70S type. They have other features as well, but they're not universal to all the bacteria. You can see the other features in the diagram above. Also, we're considering here viruses. Now, they're not considered living things at all. They're not eukaryotes or prokaryotes, since they can, when they're outside of a cell, actually be formed into crystals. They don't demonstrate most of the processes of life independently. They have to get inside the cell of a living thing. And once inside the cell of the living thing, they're able to use the reproduction processes of the cell they're in to actually reproduce themselves. So they have no organelles, chromosomes, cytoplasm, nothing like that at all. And they're basically, they're very varied, but basically they are nucleic acids and DNA or RNA, which is surrounded by a coat of protein. You can have viruses that infect animal cells, viruses that infect plant cells. You can have viruses that infect prokaryotes, and these are called phages or phages. Okay, so moving on, so that's looking at prokaryotes and eukaryotes. Moving on, we're just looking at some other simple ideas. Eukaryotes that mostly are multicellular, and in a multicellular organism then you can have cells that become specialized to do particular jobs. We say they become differentiated. The cells have become differentiated, they've become different from each other. Cells often that are differentiated grouped together with other cells that are differentiated in the same way, and we call groups of cells like this tissues. We'll have different sorts of tissues that work together, that perhaps are joined together and form organs, and they have a particular job to do. The heart, for example, pumping blood around, and a leaf for photosynthesis. And sometimes, particularly in mammals, you'll have organs that work together to have a particular function, and so we've got the circulatory system here as an organ system. Okay, so we're aware, I think, of organs and circulatory systems, digestive systems, etc., but perhaps the idea of tissues is slightly new to us. There are 3 tissues we're just quickly going to look at. So epithelial tissues. Here's a rat or a mouse with its epithelial tissue being shown. So these are tissues that form layers. The actual cell shapes can be quite flat, such as in the lungs, the squamous epithelial tissue, not very thick so that gases can diffuse quickly through them. Then we've got the cells lining the intestines, so much taller cells called columnar, column-shaped epithelial cells. It's being a bit more resistant to the abrasion they'll receive in the intestines. And then in the kidney tubules, we can see we've got cube-shaped epithelial cells called cuboidal epithelial cells. Sometimes epithelial cells have tiny hairs on their surface. They're said to be ciliated, so we can see the nasal passage there has ciliated epithelial for moving. The cilia there are moving mucus along the nasal passage. So other tissues, there's muscle tissue. So there's 3 types of muscle tissue in mammals. The one in the middle is the skeletal muscle tissue, which is the sort of tissue that we use to move our bones, our arms, legs, etc. We have smooth muscle tissue, shown on the right there. So this is muscle tissue that might be moving food through the gut. That's one of its uses, and we don't have a conscious control of this, so we say it's involuntarily controlled. And then on the left there we have cardiac muscle tissue, and this is the muscle tissue that forms the muscle of the heart, and that has to be working continuously through our lives. Finally, here we have connective tissue. So here's a diagram of some connective tissue, the most common tissue in the body, joining structures together in the body. Our skin, for example, it's made of collagen fibers and elastic fibers, and then in between these fibers we'll have cells that are there to keep to fight off infections, and the mast cells there, macrophages, parts of sometimes called white blood cells, and also we have fat cells called adipocytes. So thank you very much for listening.